How is remote work, or now the call back of employees into the office from remote work, affecting the employment environment? Well, let's take a step back for a second and say what's going on here. Well, it was kicked off obviously by the pandemic, the COVID pandemic that happened just a few years ago, whereby many employees started working from home, and that continued post COVID pandemic. That is, they continued to work from home. Now there's a push to bring these individuals back into the office. The federal government has mandated that all federal employees at this point go back into the office, and many companies have followed suit. But many companies were following suit before the federal government took that step. And other companies are saying, no, not necessary. We'll let our employees continue to work from home. Now, this has caused a lot of problem for employees. Many employees hate it. They say, well, they've come to expect to work from home, and being called back into the office is an extreme inconvenience to them because they've changed their lives. In some situations, they've even moved to other locations in the world and continue to work remotely. Now, they won't be able to do that if they're being called back into the office. So there is a scientific theory behind this. It's called the endowment effect. That is, anytime you have something, you will work harder not to lose it than you will to acquire it in the first place. And for whatever reason, that's generally uniform across most individuals. You'll work very hard not to lose your job, but you might not work that hard to get that same job. Very interesting. So my question becomes, if these individuals are being called back into the office, and whether right or wrong, we know this psychological concept exists that they feel like something is being taken from them because they already possess it. Not that they were grateful that they got the opportunity to work from home remotely for that period of time. Rather, many people will look at it as, oh no, this is a benefit I have and it's being taken away from me. And as such, I should either be compensated more or should have additional benefits in work, or the nature of my work should change, or they decide to leave the workforce altogether. So that's the employee's point of view. Well, from the employer's point of view, many employers are simply saying that we're not saying that employees aren't doing the same amount of work. Many of them, like from Dell Company or the executives at Dell, put out a statement that said simply that there is no replacement for the person-to-person interaction, that meetings done over the internet generally take away from the organization, but person-to-person interaction, that's where the creativity happens, that's where the productivity happens, and thus that's a necessary component. And so they want to promote that. They want to bring individuals together, that propinquity effect, that you are attracted to individuals closer to you, and thus you are going to have greater output by, again, having people in the office. So perception on one side by the employee, perception oftentimes by the employer that you're getting more value. And of course, people are going to point out that there are individuals who take advantage of the system. I personally know individuals who, during the pandemic, continued their full-time job and got a second job remotely, and they were receiving 2 W-2 paychecks for working the same amount of time. So what that ultimately meant is that they were not dedicating 40 hours of work or however many hours a week of work they should have been dedicating to their primary job. They were splitting that time and dedicating it across 2 jobs, where they started their own secondary business and just didn't invest as much time. Now, a lot of people would argue in that scenario that, well, really, I was just doing the work I was given, and that was the expectation. If I was in the office, I would have gotten this amount of work done. I got the same amount of work done outside of the office. I just did it more efficiently because I didn't have all the meetings and all the things that make sometimes office environments inefficient. And so I had this extra time, so I did it. Now, if that is the case, then it begs the question, is there anything wrong with it? Employers generally did not like that idea, the idea of an employee having a secondary employer, that there was a conflict of interest there. And legally, there can be, particularly if you're in the same industry or if you have a employment contract that forbids that type of thing. But if you look at it from the point of view of the employee of, I'm completing the same amount of work, and maybe some employers look at it that way and say, as long as they're completing the work we're giving to them, But it also begs the question, if salaries are going up and you feel like you're compensating a person based upon their time, not necessarily their productivity, that's kind of baked into the system that you know you need someone for this role to be carried out. What does it cost you? Okay, well, it's worth it for me to hire that individual into the organization. So I'm the employer. I need someone to do this role. I hire at the market rate. Now, I'd love to pay less, but even if I had to pay more, if that were the market rate for it, I would even pay more. But in effect, you're compensating them for an amount of their time and what they're able to accomplish in this role. Now, if they were able to accomplish it in less time, an employer might argue, well, I could go out to the marketplace and get someone much cheaper. So I'm compensating for you for the amount of time that you put in, because it's stated as 40 hours of productive effort, not that I'm hiring you for these roles. Now, a contractor might be hired just to do these specific functions. An employee is hired to do this role for a number of hours, so the total productive output. So all of a sudden, employee starts to look at it as, I just complete these tasks, where the employer's looking at it is, no, I'm paying you for your productive efforts for this amount of time. It should cover at least all of these tasks. But if you want to be promoted, if you want to make more money, if you even want to justify the salary that we're paying you now, you need to do as much as you can during that period of time. And the people who underperform eventually will be let go or will leave. The people who perform higher than expected will move up, and those who perform and just meet standards will just stay there and perhaps not receive wages that even match inflation. So that's the employer's point of view. That was the employee's point of view again of, hey, I completed the task. It's all about perception. That's what we talk about here a lot of. People's scenario is affected by how they see their situation, what they've been exposed to. If you're an employee in the situation, you're going to be biased by your perspective and have a difficult time understanding the perspective of the employer. The employer, on the other hand, might have a difficult time understanding or appreciating, showing empathy for the perspective of the employee. Because, once again, we know employees, they can be removed, they can change, they can go elsewhere, they can be fired. So for an employer to expect a level of loyalty and dedication and things of that nature to that extent, where the employee does not feel that on the other side, that is, they feel like they could be let go at any time, they feel like they may be undercompensated in comparison to someone else, they don't feel that, right? They have competing interests, right? Employers have a singular interest. Employees have diverse interests, their life versus how much of their life they're giving up for their effort for the employer. Those are both sides of the coin. If you got thoughts on this, please put in the comments below. Jump onto the forums at The Business Professor. I'd appreciate it. But regardless, I hope to see you around the platform sometime soon. Until then, take care.